Welcome up Lance Roberts.
I'm very Northwestern. I mean, you can tell by my REI jacket that I bought. I think I've had this jacket for like 12 years or something. And obviously I take it everywhere. But this is me and my wife, Megan. My name's Lance Roberts, by the way. And that's my oldest is Benaiah, and my youngest is Ransom. If you want to hear the story of how they got their names, you'll have to ask me later. But yeah, so we're a family that lives in the beautiful country of Ukraine, which is that flag right there, the blue and yellow one. And it sounds like you guys have connections there, which is really cool. So I'm actually, I've been living in the western part of Ukraine. And, but I just start from the beginning. So I grew up in Central Oregon, actually. The top left photo there is kind of the dynamic of where I grew up. We had an Indian reservation right close to us. We had, the working class. We had the farmers. We had Bend, which was the kind of college town. So it was this really interesting, diverse community, but that's where I grew up. And I was taking photos. And then I joined the fire department, top right there. And of course I was taking photos. But everywhere I went, I was taking photos. I wasn't necessarily amazing at it, but the bottom left there is in Newport, Oregon. That's when I discovered I love taking photos out of cars. That's the bridge that goes over into Newport. And Shane actually knows a lot of these people in the bottom right here. I accidentally joined a Screamo band right before I went to Ukraine. The kid in front, he said, "Lance, I'm going to start this Screamo band, and I want you to join me," because I played the bass. Music was definitely part of my Central Oregon life, and I'm like, yeah, man, no problem, because I knew he would never do it. But 2 weeks later, he's like, "We start practice on Tuesday." So I joined a Screamo band, taking photos. That was my photo of the band. I'm kind of in the back on the right. And I had a mohawk. I don't wear mohawks, but that day I did, just because it was a Screamo band. And that's where I met Shane. I'm not proud of this picture. I mean, the content is wonderful, right? The subject, Shane, is great. But I had this really weird idea that you couldn't actually mess with photos because it's taking away the integrity of the photo. And so I took a lot of horribly done photos for a very long time. But yeah, so that's where I met Shane, Central Oregon. He was playing at my parents' coffee shop. And yeah, so that's where I met Shane. So, long story short, I end up in Ukraine in 2006. And this is an Orthodox church that was under construction. In 2006, there was quite a bit of that going on. There had been a boom, economic boom in Ukraine. And a lot of these very old churches were getting remodeled, at least the Orthodox churches. And I didn't have a lot of training, but I took a lot of photos. I didn't want to bore you with all the photos. But my predominant job is working with young people there with what we call the discipleship training school. So it's a 6-month program where people come get trained, and then we send them out on outreach for 3 months. So this was one of those teams that I worked with. And we went all over the place. We stayed in Ukraine, we went to Georgia, Armenia. We had students from Tajikistan, I see the flag over there, Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, all the former Soviet states, and Europe and America. So that we covered a lot of ground there. So I moved to from the capital city, and I moved to this little town called Ternopil to marry my wife there in the middle, Megan. And her sisters came to visit one day. And they said, Lance, what is there to do around here? And my wife and I kind of looked at each other and we said, we have no idea. And that was like this painful thing because they're coming to see us in Ukraine and they want to see something interesting, but we had no idea. And I felt kind of guilty because how can you love a place if you don't know a place? I love the city. I love the cafes because actually there's a lot of really good cafes in the town we're in. I love the culture. I love the relational aspect. But I didn't know anything about the history. I didn't know anything about the region. So we decided to go exploring. And we came up over this hill and we saw this rock. Actually, we saw the old monastery before we saw the rock. And I looked at this rock and I thought, wow, what is that? It's actually called Satan's Rock, Satan's Castle, Satan's Rock. There's something. So here's the story of this one. This one's great. So there was this group of monks, Dominican monks. They had to flee Kiev. One of the, I can't remember if it's the Tatars or the Mongols or one of the sweeping bands of people came through and they had to flee Kiev. So they founded this monastery long time ago. And they were praying and they were devoting their life to their community and devoting life to prayer. And Satan was unhappy, so unhappy. So he took a rock from the Carpathian Mountains, which is in the border of Romania, Hungary, and Ukraine. And he picked up a rock and he hurled it at the monastery. But you know what? They prayed really hard and the rock missed. And there it is. So that's how Satan's Rock got its name. Actually, it's really weird. It's very atypical for the whole region. But there's a valley here and then the monastery sits on the same kind of rock. Just there's this gap in between. So we fell in love with this place. This is actually our favorite place in Ukraine. And we started bringing people. I started taking pictures of this place. And then we started exploring other castles. Now, I want you to look at this picture. I'm still proud of this picture, but it's kind of like in the middle of kind of the day. There's lacking things at this photo. I have not been back to this photo at 3 a.m. yet, but I plan to someday. But this was the kind of photography I was doing because I'd never been really trained. I'd never gone. I was just doing my work and taking photos along the way. So this is in Lviv. It's actually in Ukraine. It's one of the most beautiful cemeteries in Europe, supposedly. And they have a holiday where they go and they actually put all of these candles throughout. And then it's right around. I think it might be Pentecost. And it's to remember all the people that have died. And but you just drive through these villages and you just see these lanterns in the cemeteries. It's a little eerie, but it's very beautiful. So yeah, we just started exploring and then we became the people that knew the places. So Ternopil's kind of in the center. This is within a maximum 2.5, 3 hour radius. These were all the points we'd either been to, and there's only a few points in there that we had not gone yet. So these are all castles. These are all what they call costels, which are old Roman Catholic churches that after the Polish-Ukrainian War, which I didn't know about until I started doing this, they were all abandoned. Either the Poles were killed or, well, Hitler did that as well, or they were shoved back into Poland. So it's just amazing, beautiful places that are just going into ruins. And Ukrainians would start asking us, do you know about Kremenets? Yes, I know about Kremenets. Do you know about Tarakanif? Which is cockroach, actually, literal translation. Yes, I know about Tarakanif Fort. And they're like, wow, you're a real Ukrainian. So we started going to all these places, taking photographs And I started to love this place. And even as I talk about it, I haven't talked about Ternopil in so long. Ternopil, not Chernobyl. Okay, just want to make sure you get that difference. T and P instead of CH and a B. Ternopil. Chernobyl's actually over by Kiev. So I started to love Ternopil, and I still, when I talk about it, it just invigorates that love. It's a painful history. That rock, there were 600 Poles massacred in the monastery there. But it's one of the most peaceful places I've ever been in my life. Now, I'm not, theologically speaking, I don't think that God is held to a certain place or a certain time. I think God made everything holy, and as we go into the world, we are carriers of that holiness. That's my theology. We could talk about that later, but this place really messes with me because I go there and I'm like, man, what is this place? And I look in the history. Oh, it's Dominican. Those Dominican monks, what were they doing? And then I go to another place. I'm like, why do I feel such peace here? Dominican monks. I don't know what it is about them, but wherever I go in all this region, the Dominican monks must have been really praying. But I started to love that history, and I started to understand a little bit more the nuance of why the Ukrainians had the mentalities they did, why they didn't talk about certain things, why there was this tension between the heroes and the villains of the Soviets and the Ukrainians. And it's all because I started doing this history dive just by going to these locations. So this is our map. And before when I started doing this, a lot of these places weren't there yet. But after the war, they just started popping up like crazy. Ukrainians were looking for their roots. So I found most of these things when I went on Google Maps, and I just square mile by square mile just went down the roads looking for things because there was no other way to find these, at least in English. And that's how I found a lot of these places. Then maps started coming out, tourist maps and this kind of thing, which was really more helpful than that. But just this love for the whole region. And that's one of the reasons we started Photo Club. And this was the first photo club that we had. It generated huge interest. But if you know young people and you know creative types, they were really excited and then they disappeared. So we had approximately 3 people to like 6 people in our photo clubs. But our professional photographer came. His name is Ryan Carter. If you look on Instagram, Ryan Carter Images, you'll see a lot of people from Congo. You'll see a lot of people from Nepal, Georgia, the country. So he works for, he doesn't work for, he's working with a project that him and another guy started called Kitoko Oyo, which is basically looking at Congo from a beauty standpoint instead of all the horrible things you hear on the news. I highly recommend looking at his stuff because he really knows how to bring out the character and just the beauty in the people he's photographing. So he helped start this photo club, and we were joking. I can't remember your name, but you said, I do the coffee and the cookies. I was the coffee and the cookies guy. I brought the coffee, the cookies, and my flashlights, and I got some gear. So I was the guy that had all the gear and stuff. And then he was the one that helped us all take good pictures. So I'm really not that amazing. But I'll show you something here. So we started the photo club. We started doing interesting things. Started playing with light. This is so I'm there on the right. This was with our phones, just doing random stuff. So we just started understanding what photography was from a minutia. And this is Satan's Rock after Photo Club. And you can see it's very different. It's early morning. You're looking at composition. You're looking at all this stuff. And Ukraine just has the most beautiful landscapes. So it's really easy to take photos when you do it at the right time. So just little tiny things like that really, really helped all of us. And that's why photo clubs are so amazing. This is recorded. I don't want to say it wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was Dostoevsky said, "Beauty will save the world." And I kind of think that's something Jesus would say. Jesus says, "I'm making all things new." And that's one of the things that we really want to do with Photo Club, was to create community, to build skills, and just show something beautiful to a region that was searching for its identity, that was coming out of war into post-war, trying to figure out, who are we? Why are we unique? Why is this place beautiful? And so we were one of a group of people that were a group of organizations and stuff that were telling this story. So on one of these trips, I figured out that I could take portraits. This was we were at a castle, and this was a long tunnel underground, and the light was coming in one direction. And this is not a flash or anything. This was just from that opening. We had controlled light, and I'm like, wow, that's kind of cool. I can take photos of people, because I hated taking photos of people. I don't hate it now, but I kind of still hate it, because you're dealing with a person. You're not dealing with just like this solid rock, right? Rocks stay there, don't move, right? It's really easy to take a picture of a rock, but as soon as you get somebody, you don't want to make them look bad. You want to bring the interest of that person without making them look something that they don't like. That, it's really a hard thing. But that's when I started realizing that I could do it with the help of Photo Club, having a really good friend that was a really good photographer. And we started just taking pictures. So we started new techniques. We went into the old abandoned warehouses, and this is a steel wool technique. You just take steel wool and you put it in a whisk. You tie a rope on the whisk, you light it, and you swing it. And then this is like, I guess, a 5-second exposure. So we started taking that other places. Into the beauty of Ukraine. This is Nirkiv, Vodospad, waterfall. And in this, I think it's January. So you got flowing water, but at the same time you got ice. That's actually me doing the twirling. But at the same time, I was the one that set up, because I have this nifty little, you take the picture as you're twirling thing. So we started, bringing stuff together, just trying things. And that's what a photography club is good for. You just try things and see how it works. I would not recommend doing this during the summer, just so you know, because that's really hot and it can start a fire. We didn't start any fires. We were smart about it, but yeah, so we just started doing all sorts of stuff. And I want to tell you about Stacy, my good friend Stacy. Stacy wanted to learn about photography. She was the most active participant in our photography club. We still chat. I put a picture of a flower. I'm doing a year-long photo challenge. And then she responded with 2 flowers on Instagram. And so she became a real good friend to us. And she's an introvert, but she loves people. And the photo club was just a way to actually get her into a group of people where she could be herself, be loved, be cared for, find community, but at the same time grow in her skills. And she's really doing a good job with her photography. And so we had a lot of fun together. So this is one of the reasons why this is the main reason, I would say, we did photography club, because people are precious. They're made in the image of God. She's actually an atheist, if she's watching this. Hi, Stacy. But she didn't care. She didn't care that we talked about God and the beauty of nature. And are you still an atheist, Stacy? Because I mean, after you look at all that beauty, can you really be an atheist, Stacy? She would just chuckle when I'm saying this. So, yeah. So that's Stacy, But what that did in me was it started something in me where I wanted to start taking pictures of people. And so this is one of our teams. Me and my photography buddy, Ryan, these guys asked us, they were cooking for a school that we were doing in our building. This is our kitchen. And they said, can you take our team photo? And we're like, just use your camera. Like your phone camera. Don't make us get out our big cameras for just a team photo, except if you want to do this. And they're like, okay. So the two on the left, they eventually got married, but he's a professional chef there in the foreground, and they were all there, the helpers. So this is actually 7 photos, 7 or 8. I made the big flames per the instruction of Josh, the master chef. And this was the goofy photo. We had a serious photo and then the goofy photo. So I was in charge of putting together the goofy photo. And so we just stitched the images together, made sure the flames looked right. Actually, the glow in the vent there is actually from a different photo because I didn't like the glow of the original photo. And of course, we didn't want her there when in the background in blue. We didn't want her there when the flames were going. So we made sure that there were no flames. So it's just like all of this kind of fun stuff. And that's what photo clubs are good at, is creating opportunities to do stuff. Then we got an idea. We had a youth outreach in a very small town called Borshiv. If you've ever heard of borscht, it's not a soup. It's not a stew. If you want to talk to Ukrainian and say, borscht, I know borscht. It is not soup. It is not stew. You will be their friend forever because it's not soup and it's not stew. But Borshiv is this little town that we have a project in. And the youth had never had this experience where they were actually photographed. This guy caught my attention. His eyes were just amazing. So I took most of my photos of him, and I got as close as I could. He was really good about it. But what I did is I went to the local market. I bought a secondhand, like drapes, a pipe, some clamps that you put on like a car battery, and hung it. And then we, with a flash and a reflector, we were just taking photos of the young people. And they were ecstatic. Like, I'm not amazing. These aren't the most amazing portraits, but they were something that these guys had never had. And this, you can't see it in this photo, but it says at the bottom there, don't trust anyone. And he's got this cross on his neck. And he really wanted to show it off. So it's really hard to get somebody's neck and their face. But for them, it was fun. It was something new. And then they had a real portrait that they were proud of that wasn't done on a phone. So that's something that we did that came out of Photo Club. But that was more of our ministry that we did with me and Ryan. Just because photography is a good way to bring value to people and to showcase other people. And it's really easy to do. Digital photos are cheap. And yeah, this is birthed out of the Photo Club and out of a love for not just the place, but also the people. So that moved into a kind of a personal project. I'm going to call this a lifelong project because I'm really slow. When I went on sabbatical with this project as well. But I call it Portraits of Formation. And the idea is I take a portrait of somebody and then I interview them and get a snapshot of what is forming their life. Because everything is forming us, the books we read, the entertainment we watch, the food we eat, like everything is forming our worldview. And I'm just trying to catch a snapshot because over our life, it kind of changes. So I started this project and this guy did it over like, I don't know if you know what WhatsApp is. I don't know, there's so many messengers out there. We use Viber in Ukraine. But yeah, so we just had this conversation, and then I posted it on on an Instagram thing that I created. This guy, I did an interview with him, audio interview, but we had technical glitches, so I never got it up. But this is Matyas. He's Hungarian. He is actually a YWAMer in Kiev. Married a good friend of mine, Kate, and they have 2 kids. Yes, 2 kids. For a second, I thought they had 3. I haven't seen him in a while. But yeah, this is his personality. I just got there. I'm like, hey, dude, let's go shoot something. And he's like, can I jump and kick? I'm like, yes, jump and kick. So we were trying to just have fun with it. And this is kind of my origin story of why I started Portraits of Formation. This is Sasha Borisov. He is a missionary, post-missionary, post-pastor, but he's kind of still a pastor. He was a chaplain in the war in eastern Ukraine, and he turned soldier. And it really, his daughter was the one holding the frying pan in that previous photo. She was on staff with us, so we got to actually see this whole story unfold in their family. And I really wanted to take his picture. Actually, it was something in me that I felt like the Holy Spirit just said, this is part of his process. Tell his story. So I'm like, okay. That gave me a little motivation because I wouldn't have done it without that prompting. So I was like, hey, Sasha, I really want to take your photo and I want to interview you. Are you okay with that? He's like, sure. I mean, he's this big guy, And he's like, can I bring my AK? I was like, nobody's at the base today. Yes, bring your AK. So I got to shoot him, photograph him at the base, our YWAM location, in his uniform. He's got the patch there. It says Charakternik, which is loosely translated chaplain, but actually the right word is kapellan. So I actually started to do some research. A charakternik went with the soldiers way back in Ukrainians' warring days as a spiritual leader and fighter. And so I found that interesting as I interviewed him because it really affected his family. It affected his church. It affected his whole community. And just taking his photo and giving this interview gave him the opportunity to say things that in English, which was helpful. That helped him process what he was actually going through. Sasha's an awesome guy. I really respect this man. And to listen to how he went from chaplain to soldier is heartbreaking. And at the same time gives me huge questions about the Christian walk, about what is godly. I have a Quaker background. So I have a pacifist background for 8 generations. And to listen to a man say, I just had to pick up a gun so I could be with the soldiers. So he was this kind of chaplain soldier, but it was really interesting. And if you just look at him, you're like, wow, that's an interesting photo. But the story is just incredible. So I have posted that one. It's the only one I have recorded before we went on sabbatical. But this is going to be one of my lifelong projects, and it all came out of Photo Club. And it came out of that co-working with this professional photographer, but other photographers, just trying to learn and try things. And there's one more thing that I wanted to say. I love this photo, but I'm ashamed of this photo. Don't let anyone ever tell you to shoot in JPEG. Always, always, always shoot in RAW. I was convinced to shoot in JPEG. I shot this one. I came back and realized, oh no, it will never be what it could be. So always shoot in RAW. Always. But, and I end on our favorite place. But yeah, hey Shane, how much time we got? I probably went over, huh? Yeah? So I'm open for questions or anything if you have them. So I started with natural lighting, and which was really helpful because when you start with natural lighting, it really helps to understand directional lighting. You're not so focused on where do you put the flash, where do you put a reflector. So what I would do a lot of times is tell a friend, can you get as close to that window as you can and have like, if it was like a white shade or something, and I would just position them so I could actually see what I was shooting because it's a constant light. So that's kind of how I started to learn how to use directional light in my photography. Then I got an umbrella, but you know, being a missionary, you don't have a ton of resources. So I basically had a reflector, and I had like, you know, one of those circle little reflector things that pop out in a really cool way. And then I had a flash with an umbrella. And that has been my studio. I actually, that was what I took this guy with. I had the jerry rig. So I had, of course, the main flash on the left side, and then you can see the kind of reflective light right there on the right side of his face. So I had my reflector on that side. So I used my flash with the umbrella, and I shot against the reflector. And by the way, I used the most untechnical terminology because I am not that kind of person. If you want to like know very technical details, I'm not the guy you talk to. But I can tell you generalities. I can paint word pictures. But yeah, so in this photo, that's what I did. So I have my main light, and then I just reflected off of that main light with my reflector.
I see a lot of square format.
Yes.
Square format, or do you crop?
I typically crop square. So I like either really wide or I like square. So I'm either really constrained to the square, or I shoot super wide as I can, and then I crop it. I just moved to see, this is where I get wrong, 7D, Canon 7D, D7, one of those. Thank you. So I can actually work with that a bit more. My previous one was a T6i, Canon T6i. So I was super limited in what I could do, which made me actually learn lighting really well. My dynamic range was absolutely nothing. So, yeah, so I typically shoot thinking I want to make this square, or I shoot thinking I'm going to crop this really wide, if that makes sense. Or I just look at a photo and say, what do I want today? So there's a lot of experimentation that goes with it as well, which is nice with a digital camera. It's cheating, but I think it's okay cheating. I took the portrait. By the way, this was my last photo shoot with my T6i because I was having a problem with autofocus, and when you're shooting portraits with a max amount of people, don't have problems with your autofocus. I was manually focusing every shot. But a lot of them came out really well. And so what I did is I edited like 3 per person. That first guy I think I did 5 or 6. And then I sent it to the leader of this ministry, and he, I'm not sure if he printed or just sent them, but within a day I saw some people had changed their profile pictures, which was like, yeah, I feel really good about that one. So yeah, so we would take the pictures and then send it off to the ministry leaders.
You mentioned a couple times about the war.
Yeah.
Which war?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, because it's recent in my mind. 2014, when Russia invaded. I have to be careful how I say this because I don't want to offend anybody. The official terms is Russian-backed separatists, and Ukrainian forces had that clash in eastern Ukraine, and that's when Russia took Crimea, and is now in occupied Crimea. Yeah, so that's the one I'm talking about. And it's still going. I think the latest stats is 14,000 people have died since, I think it started in late 2013, 2014. So it's still ongoing, and a lot of people have died because of it. It's just kind of gone off the news until Russia does something, and then it goes back down. Well, thanks for letting me share. This is my first time I've actually stood on a stage since COVID, speaking in English without a translator. So, and I have that, I don't know if you guys experienced the post-quarantine awkwardness, coming out and just like having to talk to people, and you're like, I used to be social, now I'm not as social. So this has been really fun. Thank you guys for having me. I love what you guys are doing. I hope to join you in the next couple months. We're going to be here for a little bit. So yeah, thanks for letting me share.